Sorry. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is SpeakHer, and yes, we're the only female group here. And we conducted a Changdeokgung cultural interpretation tour, actually in person on 31st May. So we're gonna introduce ourselves, and this is our table of contents. And let me explain why we chose Changdeokgung and why we chose cultural interpretation. We initially came with the idea of culture because all of our members enjoy the culture. And what about culture is that sometimes it needs some interpretation. So between the culture, just making a bridge between different cultures, we decided to do a cultural interpretation. And cultural interpretation of what? Then we found this. Quality education, SDG 4, and target 4.7, education for sustainable development and global citizenship. So global citizenship, it lies on the basis of cultural appreciation, appreciation of cultural diversity, and also appreciation of culture and its contribution to sustainable development. So sustainable development need to include something with nature. So we came with the palace and how Changdeokgung embraces nature. The next one we saw sustainable development goals 11, target 11.4, to protect world culture and natural heritage. And we all know that among 5 palaces in Seoul, Changdeokgung is only one UNESCO World Heritage Site. So we decided to do a cultural interpretation of a World Heritage Site, Changdeokgung. So we're going to explain more about our participants to the tour.
So we welcomed 20 participants from 12 different countries and 4 different continents. So as you can see on this map, our guests came from all across the globe. And most of our participants were exchange students and full-time university students in Korean universities, but a few were also travelers and job seekers in Korea. One interesting feature about our participants was that 90% of them had never visited Changdeokgung before, so our tour was actually a new cultural experience for them. And also, 80% of our participants said that it was their first year living in Korea, so they were rather eager to learn more about the Korean history and culture.
From here, we will be talking about how we plan the overall picture of this tour. To begin, we had 2 time slots, each team having 2 guides. The course of the tour was mainly divided into 4 parts, as you can see. First, government officials administrative area, kings and queens court politics, kings and queens area, and other royal families' residence. When preparing for the tour, we referenced the materials shown on the slides. First, the government's official sites for the information of the palace buildings to ensure accuracy. At the same time, to add uniqueness for SpeakHer's exclusive guide, we also accessed the various books and videos so that we could gain some insights on the historical episodes. To dive in further, the first focus point of the tour was interpreting the meaning of the palace buildings' names. To be specific, when describing 선원전, 인정전, 희정당, and 성정갑, we tried to show the exact meaning of each Chinese character used and enable the audience to logically guess the function of the building based on the used letters. The second focus point was the real episodes that could draw interest on the palace further. For this point, we had to make sure that the English expression contained the proper nuance of the Korean terms. When explaining 반정, we refrained from using the mere term coup, but instead mentioned as the restoration of righteousness to fully convey the intention of the source language. We used the story of Yeonsan-gun and Kwanghae-gun, who were both replaced by this 반정, comparing their political legitimacy to gain the throne. Moving on to explain 선정전's 청기화, we mentioned the episode of how the building is the only remaining one with such blue roof, which was transferred from replaced King Kwanghae-gun's symbolic palace. Finally, we told the audience about how the Crown Prince's lecture hall, 성정갑, was later turned into Daewon, the Royal Medical Office during Japanese occupation, as "de" means the inside, in this case, the royal family living in the palace. The final focus was how we concentrated on the Confucian values and architectural factors in the palace. For instance, Yongmaru, which is a central roof beam on Joseon's Giwa building, we expressed it as a dragon ridge, as dragon symbolized the royal energy, which we found it necessary to describe it literally to explain why the Queen's residence building does not have the ridge. Next, Dongbung, which is basically a word describing the crown prince himself or his palace. We use the term rising sun to explain what Dong, east, means. Last but not least, we also noted the objects in the palace that represents the Confucian value as listed. While some of them were translated directly, others, such as 일월오봉도, use a different expression to show the significance of the painting it has as a royal symbol.
So our tour is special for 3 reasons. First, it is made by students and for students. I actually joined a regular English tour while preparing for this project, and I saw people from all ages. So we wanted to add something more friendly for the young people, so we added the coffee chat at the end, which many participants enjoyed. Second, it brings SDG 4.7 and 11.4 to life. We try to promote the culture and heritage to foreign knowledge. And third, we try to focus on the interpretation, not just the translation. For example, in introducing the Kunhongmun, the west gate of Changdeokgung, we explained Kunhong gate, the near translation. We tried to mention that Kunhong gate means Antelope and Tiger, and they both stand for West and East Asians Unyangwang thoughts. So people, foreigners who were new to this concept, actually enjoyed this explanation a lot. So we'll move on to the next.
So after we had our tour, we conducted a survey on overall satisfaction of the tour, and we can say with confidence that a lot of our participants were very satisfied with the tour. So you can see here that 83.3% were very satisfied, and 16.7% was just satisfied. And participants answered that they especially enjoyed learning about the historical facts about the palace and the meanings of different buildings in Chinese characters, as well as the history and function behind each of the buildings. And but they also thought that there could be more historical episodes on the buildings and explanations of other buildings, because we couldn't cover all of the buildings in the palace, and advertisement on more platforms, because one of them answered that the tour was super cool, but it was a shame that not many people experienced it, and we also felt the same way. So this part is each of our members' reviews on the tour, and overall it was exhausting but a very rewarding experience. The weather was not as hot as we thought it would be, but it was still pretty hot, which was physically not that exhausting, but a little bit exhausting. And it was also interesting to see different people from different countries interacting with each other, and it was nice to see them show an interest in our country's history and our country's culture, and it was a nice experience overall.
Alright, before we wrap up this presentation, we did a little bit of self-evaluation by ourselves, and it's about SDG, of course. We managed to connect those SDG, and also our interpretation activities, and also the culture that we appreciate so much. And then I personally, and we also thought that it was a good starting point for Korea, and also to KITE as well. So it was a good introduction to KITE for people who participated for the event, through the coffee chat and overall the interpretation tour. And also, I think we had more room for long-term events to interpret Korea to international population of Korea. So maybe it'll be a good project for the next batch to conduct the same tours, and also for the long-term events on cultural interpretation. So thank you so much for listening, and this was SpeakHer.